Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Jimmy Mathis Show. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this Omarosa story. Look, I'm not going to defend the language that the president used, not whether he used the N-word or not, but his tweet that went out yesterday with Omarosa referring to her as a dog. It's not healthy. He's not helping his cause. Again, at the end of the day, with everything going on right now and the stories that should be dominating a 24-hour news story, him calling her a dog in a tweet, I'm over the rhetoric of the president. And I'm sure there are some of those that are on the left, there are Democrats that have listened to me over the years, and maybe you're calling me a hypocrite right now because one of my criticisms of Barack Obama back in the day was there is a decorum that comes along with the presidency. And I think that Donald Trump has really done an exceptional job. CNN coming out with a poll yesterday, Trump right now is polling above where Reagan was at this point in his presidency when we're a little over 2 months away from a general election. Now, his Twitter habits, the president has found a way to circumvent the media to communicate with his countrymen uncensored, one-on-one. Now, again, I don't think that you call a fellow American a dog if you're president of the United States. But ladies and gentlemen, enough is enough. And what you did notice, I'll get the sound 1 second from Sarah Huckabee Sanders during the White House briefing yesterday, is like everything out there, it gets flipped to race. Again, the language of the president in his tweet, I don't have it in front of me, but he's upset. And he should be because this woman right now is coming across for what it is, which is very self-serving, and the president's upset. And the fact that she was illegally recording conversations from the White House Situation Room obviously is under his skin right now. But the way that the remarks, the tweets from Donald Trump got spun yesterday in the media was it's racist. Now, look, I'll grant you, it may be misogynistic. But I'm trying to figure out how you get to it being a race issue by calling her a dog. But the question is the type of language that Donald Trump used. Did he call this individual, or did he use the N-word?
I can't guarantee anything, but I can tell you that the president addressed this question directly. I can tell you that I've never heard it.
We'll see what shakes out with all this, guys, when it's over. But the reality is, it doesn't matter. What you do have right now, however, that does matter, is Donald Trump's approval rating. And according to a new CNN poll that was compiled on Tuesday, President Trump is better off than President Ronald Reagan was at this point in his presidency, according to CNN. President Trump approval rating is at 42%. This outpaces Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton's rating of 39%, each in August of their second year in office, and narrowly tops Ronald Reagan's 41% rating in August of 1982. Real Clear Politics has President Donald Trump sitting at an average 43% approval. Clinton was obviously a very popular president, and keep in mind that Bill Clinton had the privilege of overseeing a dot-com economy. And right now, one of the things that is doing very well with the official unemployment number almost at full employment, under 4%, tackling a lot of his campaign promises on rolling back regulations, on renegotiating NAFTA, nixing the Trans-Pacific Partnership, leveling the field with our trading partners when it comes to China, getting back to promoting manufacturing here in America, the tax cuts, nixing the individual mandate on the Affordable Care Act. He is doing these things. And it's working. We've seen the stock market continue to surge. And all of this, keep in mind, while you have the Mueller probe that's going on. Defense rest yesterday on that also. We'll get to that momentarily. Now, I'm not a big fan of the whole fake news narrative, but you cannot deny the fact that the media has been on a witch hunt with this guy, as has Mueller, since the very beginning. The conversation before the guy was even sworn in was, when is he going to be impeached? And even with that right now, he's outpacing Ronald Reagan, who, by the way, his nickname was the Great Communicator. And Rick Vatz and I used to talk about this all the time when how much stake do you put in polls? And try not to focus on them too much, because a poll at the end of the day, it's a snapshot in time. And what a poll is today will absolutely change before we get to November. But when you start to stack the polls up against Bill Clinton, Jimmy Carter, and Ronald Reagan at this point in time leading into August of the second term, the second year of their presidency, I do think that there's some comparisons right now. And really all the opposition has is to paint this guy as a xenophobe, a homophobe, a racist, a womanizer, misogynistic. That's all they got right now. And what's interesting is, for the most part, I don't believe that it's landing. Whether he used the N-word or didn't use the N-word prior to him being president, it was funny. I don't know if you guys remember this or not. Barack Obama used the N-word on a podcast while he was in office. Now, of course, if he's using that language at any point, it's completely unacceptable. But if they believe that continuing down, the opposition believes that continuing down this path is going to hurt the party moving into a midterm election, believe that they're sorely mistaken on this. And right now, what is still the biggest issue on the table that the president's trying to chip away on is illegal immigration. Laura Ingraham made a remark on her program a couple days ago about the changing demographics in this country, and that the America we know and love, it doesn't exist anymore. And she was crucified for this to the point where she had to go on her show the next day and apologize.
I want to start tonight by addressing my commentary at the top of last night's show. A message to those who are distorting my views, including all white nationalists, and especially one racist freak whose name I will not even mention. You do not have my support, you don't represent my views, and you are antithetical to the beliefs I hold dear. The purpose of last night's angle was to point out that the rule of law, meaning secure borders, is something that used to bind our country together. And despite what some may be contending, I made explicitly clear that my commentary had nothing to do with race or ethnicity, but rather a shared goal of keeping America safe and her citizens safe and prosperous. Furthermore, as I have said repeatedly on this show, merit-based immigration does wonders for our country's economy, our way of life, and how we define our country. I even said that in my opening thoughts last night. I want to make it really clear that my concern will continue to remain with the families who have suffered the tragic results of illegal immigration, the children put in dangerous and unfair situations at the border, and all those border agents around the country who work to keep our country safe.
And I said apologize. She didn't apologize. What she did was she denounced white supremacists. She denounced those that were trying to manipulate her words to ride on her coattails. She did not apologize. She held her ground. And right now, the next thing for the president to tackle is the issue of illegal immigration, which has been a problem in this country. Looking at the poll between Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump at this point in his presidency is polling higher than Ronald Reagan was. And as great as Ronald Reagan was for the party and the country, one of his biggest failures was when it came to dealing with the issue of illegal immigration back in the 80s. And the conversation was very similar to what we're having right now, only instead of it being 15, 17, however many million people that are in this country illegally, back in the 80s it was 3 to 4 million. And the Democrats said, give us amnesty today, we'll give you border security tomorrow. And Reagan reluctantly took that deal. But it was the exact same conversation. What are you going to do? You're going to deport, you're going to round up 3 million people, 4 million people. That wasn't a pragmatic way to approach the issue of illegal immigration. The numbers were different, but it was the exact same conversation. Amnesty today, border security tomorrow. The border security never came, and one of the most fundamental responsibilities of the federal government, which is to secure our border, to protect and defend American sovereignty, was put on the back burner, and it was on that back burner for almost 40 years. And you cannot navigate from what Laura Ingraham was talking about, which is, yes, there is a change in this country. This is not being a xenophobe. This is a mass influx of people from one other country or a handful of other countries. And it's very easy to look at America, talk about the melting pot that this country has been for millions and millions of new Americans, people that wanted to come to this country, not just to stay here illegally, but to become United States citizens. And I'm going through Real Clear Politics, getting ready for the show. There was a commentary by Steve Cortez, Laura Ingraham, American nationalism is not about demographics. And nationalism and patriotism are interchangeable, and they are two very different things. Reading from Mr. Cortez's piece in Real Clear Politics yesterday, America is a country and an idea, not a race. All newcomers who respect our naturalization laws and believe in the ideals and constitution of this land are welcome and needed. Ingraham's comments about changing demographics perpetuate 19th century know-nothing alarmism about Catholic immigrants, irrevocably harming America. When it comes to policy, Ingraham and I totally concur, the individual that wrote this piece, on its fixes: build the wall, end the visa lottery, move to a merit-based legal immigration, and support and empower ICE. Notice that none of these goals pertain to demographics. Well, but you can't get away from the demographics. And again, this is not being a xenophobe. You go back to the melting pot. Never at one point in this country's history was there such an influx of one nationality. Talk about the melting pot, that's what it was. We would absorb 5% Italian, 5% Spaniards, Polish, Irish, German. And also, there were long periods of time where we shut the spigot off and we gave time for assimilation. And how many politicians and really presidents have ran on the issue of border security, of getting illegal immigration under control over the last 40 years, going back to when Reagan did the amnesty bill that he didn't want to take. And then little to no action happens with it. If you remember when Donald Trump first took the escalator down at Trump Tower and announced his candidacy, he was crucified from the word go. He ran his campaign on the issue of illegal immigration. And going back to Ronald Reagan, as Reagan said, a nation without borders is not a nation. But I think it's dangerous when we start to confuse nationalism with patriotism. And many Americans are patriots, and they love this country and the constitutional republic that we live in. And they do believe that we are abandoning many of these principles, and not voluntarily. Not only not voluntarily, but we are kicking and screaming every step of the way. And it is lunacy if you cannot have an intelligent conversation about the pain and the hurt that has been levied on this country as a result of illegal immigration. You look at MS-13. You look at the crime that has come along with it. I'll take it a step further than Laura Ingraham. You look at the disintegration of our culture, of our language, of American exceptionalism. And that ties into patriotism, not nationalism. And these two things, they are not interchangeable. And that is a point that needs to be made and made time and time again. Because what the left has done, I hate saying the left, but it is true. If you are a patriot and you believe in the basic building blocks of this country, then you're being painted as a xenophobe. Or if you stand up and say anything about anything right now, you're a racist. And somehow calling somebody a dog in a tweet is now making Donald Trump a racist. And they're piggybacking off of whether he used the N-word or didn't use the N-word at a time right now, ladies and gentlemen, when we are at a crossroads in this country. And that really, when you get past the entertaining fact that is the Trump administration to a certain extent, the reason why he is president right now is because the country is having kind of a point of recognition, a point of reckoning. They really are. And the American citizen has looked back over the decades, and they do not believe that their government, and specifically their president, has put America first. And they also believe that these politicians run on grandiose plans to get elected, and then like so many politicians, whether it's to win a general election after a primary, or once they actually win the crown to then stay in office, they abandon everything that they ran on. And I find this comical that you have people that run on these platforms, they win, and then they back away, especially on something as basic and simple as border security. And yes, the wall, and we don't need 2,400 miles of wall, but yes, we do need a southern wall, and we should have it since we've already paid for it once. But what Donald Trump is talking about, whether it's E-Verify or a merit-based immigration system, getting rid of chain migration, and I understand you can look at some of his family members and call him a hypocrite. I'm just trying to have a real conversation when it comes to the issue of illegal immigration and what I believe is the number one responsibility of the federal government, which is to defend the country. And if you're not going to defend your border, and that doesn't just mean the southern border, of course, I understand that. But if you're not going to enforce immigration laws, which we have not, then they're not performing one of their most basic fundamental responsibilities. And that is where the frustration is right now in this country. So I don't understand what was so offensive with what Laura Ingraham said. But there is a difference between nationalism and patriotism. Patriotism fundamentally means affection for one's country, a willingness to defend it. Nationalism, it is. It's a little bit more extreme. It's an unforgiving form of alliance to one's country, as opposed to patriotism, which involves social conditioning and personal opinion. Nationalism involves national identity and the belief that one's nation or its government is supreme. I do not believe our government is supreme. I do believe that free market capitalism, that our Constitution, that individual liberty, that property rights, I do believe that those things reign supreme. Problem is, I'm not sure how many politicians out there right now are defending those American ideals, or defending negative liberty. Now, our government is not supreme, and that's why I cringe sometimes when those on the left preach and promote nationalism versus patriotism. No, I don't believe our government is supreme at all, whoever is in office. And that, by the way, is why we have a Declaration of Independence and a Charter of Negative Liberty and a contract with the people to the government, and very clearly laying out what the government cannot do. And from the conception of this country, a government that tries to slowly chip away and erode at these inalienable rights that are not given to us from our government, but from our Creator. And that's why the Declaration of Independence is a mandate from the people to the government on what the government cannot do. Cannot infringe on a free press, freedom of religion, cannot hold somebody in perpetuity without bringing charges. The feds cannot impede on states' rights. It's a charter of what the federal government cannot do. Now, we also collectively agree that together, the 50 United States, under the umbrella of a federal government, federalism, there's some things that the federal government needs to do, most notably defend the border. And you have somebody like a Laura Ingraham, and I don't know Laura Ingraham personally. I'm just not a huge fan of her show, just her shtick. I'm just not a huge fan of it. But to sit here and say that there is a demographic change in this country, and now she's being mandated to apologize for it, it's funny because I remember Barack Obama saying time and time again, and he was one of many Democrats, that minorities will be the majority by 2040. I mean, this is just basic reality here, ladies and gentlemen. There's nothing xenophobe about it. And what the left wants on this is open borders. And the right's been complacent also over the last 40 years. Democrats have enjoyed illegal immigration because they believe they are future voters for tomorrow. And a lot of Republicans have enjoyed it because it's cheap labor today. Meanwhile, the people that are paying the price for all this, literally and figuratively, are the American people. And whether it's unfair trade deals or border security, and when I say border security, I'm not just talking about the physical border. Border security is when we issue visas, which is an agreement for the government to allow somebody into the country for a specific period of time and for a specific purpose, with the understanding that they will leave when the time is up, or if they're here on a student visa, when they're no longer in school, whatever the terms of that agreement are, when they stay, which is the way almost half of everybody in this country illegally that is here right now originally got to America, was at the time through a legal channel. And the American citizen, not resident, not guest, American citizen believes that they're on the back burner. And rightfully so. And now you have Donald Trump, who has been holding to the majority of his campaign promises. They're working right now on restructuring NAFTA, the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, off the table, the individual mandate, done. Tax reform, done. Donald Trump is rolling back regulations, is promoting manufacturing. There was a piece in the Huffington Post. The economy won't save Republicans in the midterms. This was in the Huffington Post yesterday. The Huffington Post acknowledges that the economy is doing pretty well right now. But not only are they saying that this will not save the Republicans, they're saying it may hurt them. Sure, Wall Street's doing good, economy's doing good, but is that trickling down to the people? And their argument is no. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to turn this ship on a dime. We didn't get to where we are right now in a year or two. From the piece, same story with the tax cut. Republicans thought it would give them bragging rights with voters. But so little of it, meaning the money, actually trickles down, that Republican candidates have stopped bragging about it. Rather, Democrats hit dirt when they emphasized that the immense deficit created by the 10-year tax cuts had become the excuse for Republicans to target cuts in Social Security and Medicare. I still do not understand how a tax cut becomes an expenditure. Because there's so many in government, and it's really the ideology of the left, that the federal government must spend X amount of money. Because they believe all these things that the government is supposed to do right now, whether it's housing, education, healthcare, food, there can't be any cuts. We used to joke around about this all the time under the O'Malley administration, where he would brag about his tax cuts. Meanwhile, the state budget still went up every single year. Well, it didn't go up as much as we thought it would, but it still went up. Significantly, by the way. Under the 8 years of Martin O'Malley being governor in the state of Maryland, I believe the budget went up almost $10 billion. Did the quality of life go up $10 billion in the state of Maryland? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And sure, what the left will do is do what they always do in this upcoming midterm election. The rich got their tax cuts. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. We touched on this yesterday briefly. Look, they're right about that. But as Reagan said, since we're comparing the approval rating of this time in Reagan's presidency to this time in Donald Trump's presidency. And Trump, by a nose, but is beating the great communicator at this point in his presidency at the wire when it comes to his approval rating. And Ronald Reagan, call it fake news, call it whatever you want, did not have the media that Donald Trump has right now. Some of it may be warranted, but this day in, day out, constant attack against the president from the media did not exist under the Reagan administration. Not to this level. And now you're seeing a robust stock market. You're seeing a president that's focusing on manufacturing, getting back to building things in this country that we had built here before. Meanwhile, what did we hear from Barack Obama? President Obama acknowledged the fact that manufacturing had left our shores, but he said, those jobs are gone. We can't get them back. That's what he said. Need to figure out how we're going to compete in this new world. Those jobs are gone. Hillary Clinton on the campaign trail wanted to kill coal, our number one export. NAFTA, that was negotiated under Bill Clinton, then renegotiated through every president since, is not what's in the best interest for this country. And meanwhile, and again, each president, going back to Clinton, has their paw prints on it. Meanwhile, while President Barack Obama is talking about American jobs that are never going to come back to our shores, what's he doing behind closed doors via his surrogates? Negotiating the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Another quote-unquote free trade deal that had nothing to do with trade was actually putting American sovereignty in jeopardy. And then with the help of Ben Cardin, I'm trying to remember the other senator right now, I'm drawing a blank on it, was able to flip the treaty provision on its head so you didn't need 2/3 of the Senate presence to ratify it. And the Trans-Pacific Partnership was absolutely a trade deal. By definition, it was a trade deal. And when John Kerry was asked why it didn't go through the treaty provision, Article 2 of the Constitution, John Kerry said because the president knew that it never would have been ratified. And the American people felt slighted on that. Remember, look, this article on the economy may be a negative for the Republicans. I don't know that it's a negative. I'll give them credit for one thing, same problem that Barack Obama had with his official unemployment number being around 5%. And real quick, most economists out there believe that if the country is at full employment, you're looking at about 3%. So 3% unemployment, to many, believe that that is full employment. There's 3% of the population, for whatever reason, maybe it's substance abuse or just intellectual ability, there's 3% of the population that is just unemployable. Well, look, Barack Obama, was enjoying an approval rating, an unemployment number at around 4 to 5%. So I'll give him the extra 2% and say he was at full employment. He also dealt with a very robust stock market, thanks to quantitative easing and the bond buying program and the manipulation of the market. Did any of that money trickle down? Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. Food stamps went through the roof. Government dependence went through the roof. Thanks to the Affordable Care Act, we then also had to absorb ridiculous amount of money to provide health insurance if we weren't having our neighbors do it for us. The cost of college has gone up. Home ownership is unattainable for many Americans. Cost of vehicles went up thanks to CAFE standards and mandates from the federal government that drove up the cost of automobiles big time. This is the byproduct of overregulation in a society. And under Obama, a president that is saying manufacturing, building things in America that we had built before, not going back real far here. Industrial Revolution was not that long ago, saying those jobs are gone. Violence across our cities skyrocketed. Put Baltimore aside for a second and put Chicago aside for a second. Do you realize overall crime in major U.S. cities is actually coming down? Why? because police are getting back to work. We don't have this day in, day out verbal attack on police and how they're acting stupidly. The Department of Justice seizing control of police departments across the country, and just this non-stop attack on the law enforcement community. Now, Baltimore is sort of in its own little unique situation right now, thanks to all of our missteps and what transpired a couple years ago, and Chicago has its own set of problems. But nationally, crime is actually coming down across the country. But the left is saying that Donald Trump and the Republicans dead in the water because they're all a bunch of racists and homophobes and xenophobes and all the attack rhetoric that we've heard in the past. Meanwhile, ironically enough, the black community is doing better right now under Donald Trump, who is being a racist day in, day out. Black community is doing better under Donald Trump right now than at any point in recent American history, especially under the 8 years of the Obama administration. And what's interesting is even when the unemployment came down under Obama, the unemployment in the black community, and specifically the young black community, did not. That number is drastically coming down. More minorities under Donald Trump are getting jobs. But the left looks at this, and what they're saying is, fine, the rich are getting richer, but because of the attack on unions, and because we're not talking about raising the minimum wage, we're not talking about income inequality, all the things that the Democrats believed was going to put Hillary Clinton in the White House in 2016, that's not really part of the national conversation right now because they don't have the bully pulpit of the presidency. Now, whether it's the Mueller investigation or the fake news, however you want to classify that, day in, day out, we have hate being shoved down our throat. Well, what a racist this president is. And I don't care who the president is. You hit a point at the end of the day, he's still a human being. And everybody has their threshold of what they're not going to take anymore. Now, I will concede a lot of this may be self-inflicted with Donald Trump. But I cannot recall any president that has had to put up with this day in, day out attack levied against the media. And when I'm talking media, I'm not talking about the commentators. I'm talking about the journalists. From the Hill yesterday, 50% of Americans want this Mueller thing wrapped up before November. And it should be. There's no reason why it can't be. The only reason it wouldn't be would be for political reasons. Also, half the people actually believe that Mueller has been fair in this. I'm not sure I agree with that, but half of the country does. Democrats don't want it wrapped up before the general election because they want this hanging over the president, hanging over the Republicans. And it would seem, at this point, with the defense resting yesterday, that it would be in the best interest of the country to have this thing wrapped up so people can make an educated decision when they go to the polling place in November. And maybe for once, put politics aside. I think Donald Trump has done a really, really great job. In a very short amount of time, has been clipping off some pretty big ticket items while he's battling the media day in, day out, and deflecting a lot of shots that have, just framed him as this demagogue. So I don't know if the guy used the N-word or not. But I'll tell you what, it doesn't deserve to be the only story out there right now when the individual seems that's accusing him of this illegally was recording conversations in the Situation Room and seems pretty concerned about one thing, and that's pushing her little goofy book. And by the way, let's for 1 second assume that they do have him on tape using the N-word. Who knows? And I don't want to debate this over and over, but let's say that he does. Now, I'm not going to say so what. That may affect your decision on whether you want that individual to be president, to have a second term. Is that an impeachable offense now? Language that he used as a civilian, is that an impeachable offense? Talking about impeaching the guy before he was sworn in. And he calls somebody a dog on Twitter, and now that's racist. And that's why I thought Laura Ingraham handled herself very well. Not on her apology, but when she comes out, she denounces those that are trying to take an advantage of this, trying to steal her brand, her character, which is what it was. Great. So some white supremacist comes out and goes, I agree with Laura Ingraham. It's basically what happened. It wasn't David Duke, but it was a David Duke-ish kind of guy, and tried to jump on the bandwagon. Because they saw all the flack that Laura Ingraham was getting nationally. So they said, yeah, I agree with her. Laura Ingraham comes out the next day and goes, whoa, 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 whoa. You're despicable. She was also very smart. I'm not going to name the guy by name. I'm not going to give you credit on Fox News. I'm not going to give you the platform. I'm not going to give you the microphone. I'm not going to take your bait. I think Bill O'Reilly wishes that he had it to do over again. He tried to run Sean Hannity out of town, too. He stood up. He said, no. No, I'm going to fight. And Laura Ingraham fought. And it's the problem with those in the media where, especially in conservative media, we're always very quick to be on the defense. And I thought Laura Ingraham handled it perfect, especially on something like what happened to the country that we used to know. That is not xenophobe. I don't know what happened to this country. And don't tell me for 1 second that decades of, for all intents and purposes, what has been an open-door policy, do not tell me that is not having some consequences to the fabric of our country. It may be uncomfortable to hear. And I'll say one thing in closing on this immigration deal, and nobody brings this up. Before we're going to restructure legal immigration into this country, and by the way, they should be shutting the door on that temporarily right now while we figure it out. And Donald Trump talked about that, and he was vilified for that thought, which we've done in the past. But the question is, how many people do we want naturalized in this country every year? Because right now it's about 1 million. Not visas, about 1 million people are granted citizenship to this country. The left won't have an honest conversation about this because they don't want 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million. It doesn't matter what the number is. They want open borders. And they've had it in the past. They really have. And that's why they use the stories of the separation of the children and their families at the border, which went on under the Obama administration also. And I thought what Donald Trump said at his press gaggle a couple weeks ago was spot on when forgot the reporter that shouted to him when he was walking out to Marine One, Mr. President, what do you say to these families? He wasn't being mean. What he said was, stop illegally trying to cross into our country. It's not my fault. Right now, as Commander-in-Chief, it's my responsibility to defend the border if we're going to live in a nation of law and order. Appreciate your time this morning, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow morning. The podcast, at the very latest, always available for download by 5 a.m. You can get it at jimmymathisshow.com. It's on Twitter, Apple iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud. Follow us on Twitter at Jimmy Mathis Show, on Facebook, and we are continuing to build out different ways to distribute the program to you. So appreciate all the support. Everybody have a great, safe day. See you tomorrow. Thank you, Kelly. Go Orioles. Bye.